Elena Marquez was inspecting the structural flow of a hillside eco-resort when her phone buzzed in her jacket pocket. The name flashing on the screen made her stomach twist. Damian Holloway, her husband of 11 years. She stepped away from the team and answered with a breathless, "Hey." His voice was cold, transactional. "I'm filing for divorce. My attorney will be in touch." Just like that. No explanation, no emotion. A dry snap of words that landed like glass shattering on concrete. For a moment, all she heard was the wind brushing through scaffolding and distant drills. Her fingers gripped the phone tighter. "You're divorcing me? Over a call?" she asked, disbelief barely cloaked beneath her composure. But the line was already dead. Her heart pounded like a war drum in her chest, but she didn't scream, didn't cry. Instead, she slid the phone into her bag, turned to her junior architect and said calmly, "Send me the revised layouts before noon." On the outside, nothing cracked, but inside, something had shifted. Something sharp, ancient, and rising. She didn't know it yet, but that call would ignite a fire that would burn down everything she once believed and rebuild something far stronger from the ashes. That night, Elena sat alone in the quiet of her mother's old ranch house, where she'd gone to clear her head. The open-plan kitchen echoed with silence as she poured herself a glass of red wine she didn't even want. Her laptop sat on the counter, untouched until now. Something gnawed at her, an instinct she couldn't ignore. She opened the lid and logged into the shared cloud account she and Damian had used for years to swap travel receipts and renovation plans. It hadn't been touched in months, but when she clicked into a backup folder labeled Q4_designs, a pit opened in her stomach. Inside were dozens of photos. Damian and another woman, arms locked, lips pressed together, lounging on a beach in Bali. The dates were from just 2 weeks ago, the same weekend he claimed to be in Dallas pitching to investors. She clicked on one of the images, heart thudding in her throat. The woman was young, striking, model perfect, the kind Damian always swore didn't do it for him. In one picture, he held her close on a yacht, a champagne glass in hand, smiling wider than Elena had seen in years. Her hands trembled. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was documented, raw, public, real. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad as bile rose in her throat. But she didn't close the screen. Instead, she opened a folder on her desktop titled Prenup Copy and dragged the images beside it. A switch flipped inside her, quiet but final. If Damian wanted war, he would get it, but not the kind waged with screaming matches or thrown plate. Hers would be fought with receipts, clauses, and calm precision. She saved every image, every email, every timestamp. Not because she needed to remember, but because he needed to be reminded. As the wind howled through the cracked window pane, Elena whispered to no one, "You really thought I'd never find out?" Then she smiled bitterly and added, "But now that I have, you'll wish I never did." Elena didn't wait long. The next morning she called Damian while seated at the stone patio table behind the ranch, the sunrise casting gold across her face. When he picked up, his voice was casual, almost smug. "Did my lawyer reach out yet?" he asked. She cut straight to it. "I know about Bali. I saw the pictures. You lied." A silence followed, but it wasn't guilt, it was amusement. "Oh, that," he said, as if she'd caught him stealing office supplies. "Listen, Elena, you're talented, sure, but you've never exactly captivated me. Aria gets me. She's exciting. You're just predictable." His words sliced deeper than she expected, her hands clenched beneath the table. "So this is how 11 years ends? You run off with someone half your age and tell me I'm boring?" He chuckled. "Don't make this dramatic. I've outgrown you. You bury yourself in blueprints and meetings. That's not a marriage, it's a project timeline." Elena's voice dropped an octave. "We had a prenup, Damian. You remember that, right?" He scoffed. "That old thing? You wouldn't dare. You've always walked away instead of fighting." That's when something shifted. She stood slowly, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Then I guess I've changed," she said evenly, "because this time I'm not walking, I'm collecting." Damian paused. "You're bluffing." But his voice cracked, just slightly, and Elena, hearing it, knew exactly what that meant. He thought she was soft. He forgot who drafted half of their legal documents. He underestimated her. And for the first time in years, she welcomed it. Let him doubt. Let him think she'd fold. Because the next time they spoke, it wouldn't be over the phone. It would be in a courtroom, where every smile, every lie, every bally photo would cost him everything. 2 days after the confrontation, Elena backed her SUV into the gravel driveway of her late mother's ranch house, the place she hadn't lived in since college. The porch creaked under her boots, and the scent of cedar and dust wrapped around her like an old memory. The home was modest but solid, paid off and still under her name. Unlike the glass and steel mansion she shared with Damien, this place had soul. As she unpacked her boxes in silence, a strange calm settled in. No staged furniture, no pretenses. Just her, the wind, and the rustle of oak leaves outside the kitchen window. That night, she lit the old fireplace and pulled out a slim folder from her briefcase. The prenup Damien once laughed off as a boring formality. Her eyes scanned the clause she helped craft. In the event of proven infidelity, both parties agree to an equal division of marital business assets. Her fingers traced the notarized signature, his arrogant and sprawling. He had insisted on that clause himself, convinced she'd never be the one to benefit from it. The irony almost made her laugh. Elena placed the folder beside her laptop and opened a new document. This wouldn't be a public meltdown or a dramatic revenge plot. No, this would be a meticulous dismantling, calm, clean, and by the book. She had built careers from blueprints and steel. Now, she'd built her freedom from ink and clauses. Damien didn't know it yet, but he'd already lost. She was just giving the paperwork time to catch up. Elena scheduled the meeting at a quiet artisan cafe in downtown Austin, a neutral space that felt more like a design pitch than a battlefield. She arrived early, dressed in charcoal slacks and a structured navy blouse, nothing flashy but undeniably commanding. When Damien's lawyer, Calvin Rowe, entered, he scanned the room expecting a distraught woman in disarray. Instead, he froze when he spotted Elena, poised and calm, sipping espresso at a corner table, a manila folder neatly waiting at her side. "Miss Marquez?" he asked, surprised. She smiled faintly. "Please, have a seat, Mr. Rowe." The conversation began cordially, but Elena wasted no time. She slid the folder toward him. "Inside, you'll find documentation of Damien's infidelity, including time-stamped photographs, messages, and booking receipts. I also included a copy of our prenuptial agreement, highlighted for your convenience." Calvin raised a brow, rifling through the evidence with growing unease. "He didn't mention this clause," he murmured. Elena tilted her head. "No, I imagine he wouldn't." "He was always better at hiding problems than solving them," Calvin cleared his throat. "My client hoped for an amicable resolution, perhaps a settlement, without involving the business." Elena's voice remained even. "Then he shouldn't have slept with a brand ambassador on the company's payroll." The lawyer blanched. "That complicates things, not for me," Elena replied. "The clause is enforceable, the evidence is airtight, and I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to inform." Calvin sat back, visibly rattled. "You're not a divorce attorney, are you?" She smiled. "No, I'm an architect. But I write contracts for a living, and I know how to build a case as well as I design a home." The message was clear. Elena hadn't come to plea or weep. She'd come to win. By the time Calvin left, the confidence in his step had vanished. Elena remained seated, reviewing her calendar. There were design meetings to attend, site visits to lead, and now an empire to protect. She didn't feel like a woman scorned. She felt like a strategist drawing the opening move in a long game of chess. Damien had chosen the battlefield. She was simply mastering it. Within a week, the ripple effects of Elena's meeting with Calvin began to spread. Word circulated quickly in the local legal community. Damien Holloway's soon-to-be ex-wife wasn't just any woman. She was Elena Marquez, the the contract wizard behind several high-profile architectural developments, known for her bulletproof legal clauses and icy precision in boardroom negotiations. Law firms that once clamored for Damien's business began quietly declining his calls. Calvin officially withdrew from the case, citing a conflict of interest. In truth, he didn't want to go up against Elena, especially not with her airtight prenup and damning evidence. Damien, who once gloated about controlling everything, now found himself spiraling. One by one, attorneys refused to represent him, either out of loyalty to Elena's name or fear of being publicly dismantled in court. He tried calling her, she didn't answer. He emailed. The messages were forwarded to her assistant. He even showed up at her firm, only to be told by reception that Elena was unavailable indefinitely. Every door that once opened for him now seemed bolted shut. Meanwhile, Elena's silence spoke louder than any outburst ever could. She didn't need to shout or fight. Her reputation, documents, and composure did the work. For the first time in his life, Damien wasn't the one in control. The woman he dismissed as predictable had outmaneuvered him with calm strategy and devastating clarity, and as the world he built began to fracture under the weight of his ego, Elena stood unmoved, not in retreat, but in power. The knock came early one morning as Elena was reviewing blueprints on her porch, coffee in hand and sunlight spilling across the plans. When she opened the door, she wasn't surprised to see Damien standing there, rumpled suit, tie askew, eyes hollow with exhaustion. He looked nothing like the man who once strutted through gala halls with champagne and bravado. "You in," he muttered, barely above a whisper. "Just don't take the company." Elena didn't flinch. "You mean the company you promised me half of, in writing?" He stepped inside without being asked, pacing like a man unhinged. "Arya's gone. Investors are pulling out. My team's panicking. I can't lose this, too." Elena leaned against the kitchen counter, arms folded. "Funny. That's what betrayal costs. Everything you thought you'd never lose." He ran a hand through his hair, defeated. "You don't understand. That business is my life." She tilted her head. "Then you should have treated your life partner with the same care." His silence stretched, awkward and raw. For a flicker of a second, he looked like he might cry. But Elena felt nothing. No pity, no regret, only a sharp sense of justice. He wanted sympathy. She offered facts. He had gambled their marriage for passion. Now he stood before her, a man stripped of leverage, begging not for love, but for mercy. And Elena had none left to give, not after the nights she cried alone, not after he tried to erase her worth with one phone call. The final papers were signed on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in a polished, glass-walled office downtown. Elena didn't even flinch when Damien's signature scratched across the final page. He hesitated, just for a second, before handing the pen to the paralegal, as if some part of him still believed he could negotiate his way out of the inevitable. But the prenup had spoken, the evidence had spoken, and now, so had the law. He was legally obligated to hand over 50% of Holloway Tech, the same company he once claimed she wasn't worthy of. Elena didn't gloat. She simply reviewed the final documents with a clean, practiced eye and nodded to her attorney. "Proceed with the transfer." She had already made arrangements, appointing a financial strategist to manage her share of the company. She had no interest in working beside Damien. Instead, she intended to invest, restructure, and expand the business from afar, with ethical policies and a green tech vision Damien had always dismissed. By the time the final stamp was pressed onto the court documents, Damien had lost more than control. He'd lost credibility, investors, and reputation. News of the divorce terms leaked to industry circles. Elena, the quiet architect, had emerged as a formidable force. Meanwhile, Damien returned to a startup half its size, stripped of luxury and painfully aware that the woman he called forgettable had just reshaped his legacy without ever raising her voice. He had filed for divorce to be free, but now Elena was the one flying. As she walked out of the courthouse, rain pattering on her umbrella, she felt lighter. Not because she had won something from Damien, but because she had reclaimed everything he tried to take. And that, more than any payout, was the victory he would never understand. 6 months after the divorce, Elena stood barefoot on the balcony of her new hillside home, a sleek, modern estate she had designed herself. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Texas skyline, and solar panels lined the roof like armor. It wasn't just a house, it was a symbol. A life rebuilt with her own hands, her own mind. She sipped her tea and watched the morning light spill across the oak trees below, remembering the silence of her old ranch, the storm of betrayal, and the quiet fury that had fueled her rise. Now, she was on the cover of Design Forward, praised for her sustainable architecture and bold leadership. Her firm had doubled in size. She had speaking offers from international symposiums. And Holloway Tech, now half managed by a woman Damien once dismissed as predictable. Every month a portion of that company's profits landed in her account, funding scholarships for women in architecture, startup incubators, and green building initiatives. She hadn't just walked away from her marriage, she'd transformed it into momentum. Damien had tried to silence her with humiliation, but she'd used every broken piece to build something unshakable. She no longer needed to prove her worth. She had lived it. And the beauty of it all? She did it without revenge, without spite. Just clarity, precision, and purpose. As the sun rose higher, Elena turned back into her home, her bare feet quiet against the polished floor. Her past no longer followed her. It had been absorbed into the foundation of something far greater, a life that was finally hers. Looking back, Elena no longer saw the divorce as a loss. It was a beginning, disguised as devastation. What she lost in Damien wasn't love, but illusion. She had spent years shrinking herself to keep peace, softening her ambition to preserve a fragile ego. But once the curtain fell, once the lies were exposed, she realized something powerful. She had always been the architect of more than just buildings. She had been building people's dreams, while quietly sidelining her own. Losing Damien meant reclaiming that space. She gained clarity, confidence, and an unshakable sense of self. In place of a cold marriage, she found purpose. In the absence of hollow praise, she discovered self-worth that didn't need validation. She no longer stayed quiet to avoid conflict. She spoke with precision and let her choices speak louder. She used to believe that success and love had to be balanced, but now she understood. Love never asks you to dim your light. Damien had tried to clip her wings, and in doing so, became the reason she learned to fly. She didn't want revenge anymore. She didn't even want his apology. What she wanted, and finally had, was freedom. The kind that comes from knowing your value, protecting your peace, and choosing yourself, unapologetically. Elena had once been afraid of losing everything, but in letting go of the man who never saw her, she made room for everything that truly mattered, and in the quiet, steady rise that followed, she found everything she was always meant to be. The story of Elena Marquez teaches us that betrayal can be a brutal gift, one that strips away illusion and forces us to confront our true power. When love turns into manipulation, walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Elena didn't just survive the betrayal, she transformed it into purpose, using intelligence and dignity to rebuild her life on her own terms. The lesson? Never let anyone define your worth. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from revenge, but from choosing yourself, standing firm, and building a life so radiant it makes the pain irrelevant. Your strength is your best comeback.